The sound of clinking glasses filled the air, laughter, music, the gentle hum of success. My dream restaurant, Ember and Thyme, was finally open. I stood near the entrance in a soft ivory blouse and tailored black slacks, the scent of rosemary butter and truffle oil swirling around me. My heart should have been soaring, but it wasn't. Every table was full, except for one. The one in the corner with the gold, reserved sign, surrounded by empty chairs. My family's table. I kept glancing at the clock on the wall, pretending not to. 7:05, then 7:22, then 8 o'clock. Each minute tightened something in my chest. Guests came up, congratulated me, asked for selfies. I smiled, said thank you, poured champagne. But behind every smile, there was this quiet ache, a hollow spot where my mother's proud hug or my father's teasing grin should have been. I'd spent years dreaming of this moment, not just to prove them wrong, but to make them proud. I sent invitations months ago. Personalized ones. Gold foil, my treat. Still, no one showed. My phone buzzed on the counter beside me. A message from Mom. I hesitated before opening it. So sorry, Maddie. Something came up. We'll visit another time. Congratulations. Just like that. 8 years of distance wrapped into 12 cold words. I exhaled slowly, forcing a smile for a camera flash nearby. Because tonight wasn't about them anymore. At least, that's what I told myself. I was 19 the last time I let my family see me cry. Back then, our kitchen wasn't anything like Ember and Thyme. It was small, cluttered, and always smelled like Dad's burnt coffee and Mom's lavender candles fighting for attention. That night, I'd cooked dinner, my first full meal, all by myself. Homemade pasta, basil sauce, roasted tomatoes. I thought they'd be proud. Dad barely looked up from his laptop. Mom sighed. Maddie, you really think this is practical? You can't build a life out of recipes. My brother, always the golden child, snorted. Yeah, you gonna open a 5-star restaurant with spaghetti? Their laughter filled the room while my cheeks burned. I tried to laugh along, but my throat locked up. All I wanted was for them to taste it, just one bite. When no one did, I quietly carried my plate back to the sink, dumped it, and turned on the faucet so the sound of running water could hide the sound of me breaking. That was the night I decided. I was done asking for permission to be proud of myself. 2 weeks later, I left home, packed a duffel bag, my grandmother's recipe book, and a letter she'd written before she passed, the only person who ever told me, Maddie, you cook with your heart. Don't let anyone turn that off. I took a bus to Chicago with $320 and one dream, to make something that was mine. The first few months were brutal. I worked at a diner that smelled like grease and heartbreak, slept on a friend's couch, and cooked for people who didn't even know my name. But every night, I opened Grandma's recipe book. The pages were smudged with flour and thyme, her handwriting curling like a whisper. A dash of faith makes anything rise. That phrase became my mantra. When I couldn't afford fresh herbs, I grew mint on a windowsill. When my hands ached from chopping, I told myself pain meant progress. When loneliness hit hardest, I pictured the restaurant I'd open one day. Warm lights, wood tables, food that tasted like love. And even though my family didn't believe in it, I did. I had to. The road to Ember and Thyme was anything but glamorous. For years, my life was a mix of late nights, cheap coffee, and quiet determination. I started as a line cook in a small bistro on the south side of Chicago. The owner, Carla Bennett, was a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 40s who'd built her place from nothing. She saw something in me that I didn't yet see in myself. Your plating's awful, she told me one night, sliding a dish back across the counter. But your flavors? They tell the truth. That's rare. Under Carla, I learned everything, how to balance spices, how to lead a kitchen without losing your soul, and most importantly, how to believe that my story had a place on a plate. The money was tight. My shoes had holes. My hands were covered in tiny burns. But for the first time in my life, I felt alive. When Carla retired 3 years later, she pulled me aside, pressed her old chef's knife into my palm, and said, Build something that tastes like you. I cried in the walk-in freezer that night because no one had ever believed in me like that before. That knife became my talisman. My grandmother's recipe book and Carla's knife. Two women's faiths guiding my path. I took every extra shift I could, saved every dollar, and started posting small food videos online. Nothing fancy, just honest recipes from my heart. To my surprise, they started getting attention. Comments from strangers who said my food reminded them of home. Messages from young women who said, "You make me want to cook again." It was the first time I realized success didn't have to be loud. It could grow quietly, like dough under a towel, soft, patient, inevitable. Eventually, a local investor reached out. His name was Ethan Cross, a restaurant consultant who'd seen my posts. He invited me to lunch, listened to my story, and said, "You've got the heart, Madison. You just need a stage." Together, we designed Ember and Time. Every corner was intentional. The copper lamps that gave off a golden warmth, the reclaimed oak tables that reminded me of my grandmother's kitchen, the open-view kitchen that said, "No secrets here." I didn't tell my family about any of it. To them, I was still working in some cafe, as Mom once phrased it. I let them believe that. Maybe part of me was scared that if I told them the truth and they still didn't care, it would break me all over again. So I waited. I waited until every detail was perfect, until the doors were ready to open, until the name Ember and Time hung proudly above the entrance. Then and only then I sent the invitations. Personalized, hand-signed, embossed with gold foil because I wanted them to see what faith could build. I told myself they'd show up, that they'd finally see me, not the dreamer who left home, but the woman who turned her dream into a home of her own. The night of the grand opening was supposed to be the full circle, the chapter where everything finally made sense. By 8:30 p.m., Ember and Time was buzzing. The sound of forks on porcelain, the low hum of jazz, the smell of seared salmon and garlic butter drifting through the air. All of it felt like a dream I'd built with my bare hands. Ethan caught my eye from across the room and smiled, giving me a small thumbs up. "Full house," he mouthed. I smiled back, though my stomach felt hollow. Because in that full house there was still that one table. The one marked reserved. Hail family. 4 empty chairs. 4 untouched champagne flutes. Every time the door opened, my chest tightened. Every time it wasn't them, the ache deepened. At 9 o'clock, Ethan whispered, "They're probably running late." I just nodded, but I knew better. My family had never been late. They'd just never been there. Still, I had a restaurant full of guests waiting for my speech. So I took the mic, straightened my blazer, and stepped into the soft glow of the lights. "Good evening, everyone," I began, forcing my voice not to shake. When I was a little girl, my grandmother told me that food isn't just about flavor. It's about love. It's about feeding people's hearts when words aren't enough. A few people smiled, glasses raised. I named this place Ember and Time because both remind me of warmth that lasts. An ember doesn't die easily, and time, well, it takes patience to grow. My eyes flicked to that empty corner. I smiled anyway. Tonight isn't just a restaurant opening. It's proof that sometimes the people who doubt you the loudest end up giving you the fire you need to stand taller. Laughter and applause filled the room, but all I heard was silence in my head, the echo of every word my family had thrown at me over the years. "You can't live off recipes. Be practical, Maddie." As I wrapped up, Ethan leaned in and whispered, "You're trending." "What?" I blinked. He handed me his phone. My speech had been live-streamed by a food blogger. Thousands of comments scrolled by. This woman's story made me cry. Her parents didn't show? That's heartbreaking. Ember and Time, Chicago's newest must-visit spot. I let out a shaky laugh, half disbelieving. All those people who once made me feel invisible, and here I was, being seen by strangers across the world. But the twist came an hour later.
My phone buzzed again.
A message from my younger sister, Lily. "Maddie, we saw the video. Mom's been crying. Dad's quiet. I'm sorry we didn't come. We didn't know how much it mattered to you." I stared at the screen for a long time. I could almost picture them, sitting at home, dinner untouched, watching the daughter they once dismissed now commanding a stage, a business, a dream. I typed a reply, then erased it. Because what could I say that years of silence hadn't already said louder? Instead, I turned off my phone and walked back into the dining room. Guests were still laughing, servers gliding between tables, candles flickering soft gold. I walked over to the reserved table, picked up one of the untouched glasses, and poured myself a drink. To the family that didn't show up, I whispered quietly. And to the one I found along the way. Carla's old knife glinted in the kitchen under the warm light. My grandmother's recipe book sat on a shelf behind the bar. I wasn't alone. Not anymore. I had built something real. Something no one could ever take from me. And for the first time that night, I didn't look at the door anymore. It took 3 days for them to finally call. When I saw Mom flash on my phone, my hands froze over the flour-dusted counter. It was early morning, sunlight spilling through the big front windows of Ember and Thyme, the scent of cinnamon rolls baking. I almost didn't answer, but I did. "Hi, sweetheart," she said softly. Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered. "We saw everything online. The restaurant looks beautiful." "Thanks," I replied, keeping my tone steady. I didn't trust my voice to carry too much emotion. There was a pause, long, awkward, heavy. Then she sighed. "Your father feels terrible. We all do. We didn't realize how much this meant to you." I could almost hear Dad in the background, murmuring something about being busy, about bad timing. The same old script. "Mom," I said quietly, "you didn't come because you didn't believe it was real. You thought it was just another one of my silly ideas." Silence. Then, "You're right. It wasn't the apology I wanted, but it was something."
"We want to come by," she said.
"Maybe have dinner there sometime? Bring the family." I leaned against the counter, staring at the framed photo on the wall, me and Carla, smiling on the restaurant's construction day, paint on our faces, pure joy in our eyes. "Sure," I said after a moment, "but on one condition." Mom hesitated. "What's that?" "You don't come here as critics. Or out of guilt. You come as guests. You sit down, eat, and actually taste what I've made. The way I asked you to years ago." My voice softened, but the steel underneath it stayed. "And you tell me about your lives, not your expectations." She was quiet for a long time. Then, a faint laugh, shaky but real.
"Deal."
After we hung up, I sat down at one of the corner tables, the morning light catching the glassware just right. My heart felt strange, not light, not heavy, but balanced. Later that evening, I wrote a message to my younger sister Lily. "I'm proud of you for reaching out. If you ever want to learn how to cook, really cook, there's a spot in my kitchen with your name on it." She replied almost instantly. "I'd like that. I think Grandma would too." And that one text hit deeper than any apology could. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about boundaries and building something healthy from the ashes of what once hurt me. I didn't need them to worship my success. I just needed them to respect my peace. That night, after closing up, I looked around at the quiet restaurant. Every chair pushed in, every light dimmed to a soft amber glow. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was chasing anyone's approval. I'd finally stopped running from the little girl who just wanted to be seen. And she, that younger version of me, finally felt proud. 2 weeks later, my family finally walked through the doors of Ember and Thyme. It was a Sunday evening, soft jazz playing, the smell of fresh bread and roasted thyme floating through the air. I saw them before they saw me. Mom smoothing her dress nervously, Dad glancing around like he wasn't sure where to stand, Lily smiling shyly beside them. For a moment, I just watched. No anger, no bitterness, just quiet observation. The girl who once stood invisible in her parents' kitchen was now the woman welcoming them into hers. "Reservation for Hale?" I asked with a small smile. Mom let out a laugh, the kind that cracked the ice. "Very funny, Madison." I guided them to a table near the window, the same one I'd reserved for them that opening night. Only this time, it wasn't empty. They tasted every dish I sent out, the rosemary butter, the lemon risotto, the seared salmon. Mom's eyes glistened with tears she tried to hide. Dad didn't say much, but when he reached for a second helping, that was all the apology I needed. Halfway through dessert, Lily pulled something from her bag, my grandmother's recipe book. "I thought you'd want this back," she said softly. I blinked. "Where did you?" "Mom kept it. She said it was the only part of you she could look at when you left." For a heartbeat, everything went still. Then I smiled, a real one this time. "Thanks," I whispered, running my fingers over the worn cover. When they left that night, there were no grand speeches, no dramatic hugs, just quiet understanding. Small steps toward something that maybe, just maybe, could grow again. Later, after closing, I sat alone in the restaurant. The last candle flickered low. I placed the recipe book beside Carla's old knife on the counter, two women's legacies resting side by side. In the silence, I could almost hear my grandmother's voice. "A dash of faith makes anything rise." I looked around at everything I had built. The warm light, the gleam of the countertops, the chairs that finally felt full. I'd spent years chasing the idea of being enough for other people. But somewhere along the way, I realized I already was. I didn't open Ember and Time just to feed others. I opened it to feed the part of me that had been starving for love, validation, and belonging. And now, she was full. I turned off the lights, locked the doors, and glanced back one last time. They didn't show up that night, I murmured with a smile. But I did. For myself. And that changed everything.